So today we are going to focus on the solution we have for winemakers to adapt their winemaking practices related to climate change. Climate change is a very vast topic. We know it exists, we know it's true, we are seeing and observing all the consequences of it every day. There is way more work to do on this, particularly starting with the vineyards, maybe changing our planted varieties, maybe completely changing our vineyard practices. But this means many years of studies before we get a result. So today I really want to focus on what are the solutions available to the winemaker so we can keep making qualitative wine and deal with all these consequences in the vineyard. Okay, so the first consequence we know is that we have a big disconnection between grape maturities, which means we will not anymore reach the right sugar content with the right acidity, the right phenolic content, and the aromas. So we will have to find compromise, change, and adapt our picking decision and winemaking practices to compensate with which maturity we didn't get. So the main one that we're seeing is that there is lower acidity in the berries, in the grapes, so in the wine. This is mostly due to the degradation of malic acid. So we are actually an unbalanced acidity with a very low malic acid, so very low lactic acid in the final wine. There is an accumulation of potassium and calcium that also makes our tartaric acid very unstable and precipitating. So the result in this means that we are having to deal with high pHs, high pH wine, meaning there is a lot of things that happen when we are having high pH, but the main one that I will talk about today is that sulfur is not usable as microbial control, and the wine are very unstable microbiologically speaking. The other one is that we are talking about an unbalanced acidity, a lack of freshness, and we are going to have to deal with this. We are seeing high sugar concentrations. Mostly it impacts the mouthfeel, but also the fermentation, and it's getting harder and harder to finish fermentations. Aromatic maturities, we are seeing a lot of blockage of maturities, and so sometimes with very high brix and low acidity we also have green character, just because the vineyards and the vine was not processing and was not actually doing photosynthesis and stopped to do all the changes. But we also see on the other end overripe aromas, cooked berries, completely dried berries that has no juice and tastes like raisins. And then we are seeing phenolic maturities that are completely different than what we know, which impact the color stability. So we are seeing more and more color instabilities. There is an impact on the mouthfeel as well, with more bitterness and astringency, especially on whites and rosé, and a lower resistance to oxidation, which means lower ageability. So to cover pretty much all this topic today is going to be a challenge, but we are going to talk first about how we can control microbes in high pH. We have to talk about sulfur alternative, and we do have successful alternative to sulfur that exist. These are successful tools that has been used already since a few years for high pH, but also in the approach of reducing sulfur in our winemaking practices. Then we'll talk about the new tool that exists to balance acidity in wine in a natural way. So we can actually use a yeast that will naturally acidify the wine by producing lactic acid, which gives you more acidity, but also a stable and very smooth acid that rebalance the acid in the acid profile of the wine. To complete fermentation in high brix very quickly, I will give you some a protocol that works every time, that is very successful, and that will allow you to not do any restarts and also prevent stack fermentation. We'll talk about how we can increase aromatic freshness in wine, so boosting the aromatic production during fermentation, but also increasing the aromatic expression. So all these varietal aromas that we have, but we don't necessarily express in the wine. We have them from the grapes. There is ways to increase this expression during aging, and we'll talk about this. And last but not least, we will balance the phenolic compounds. Talking about how to balance phenolic compounds, so we do have to basically focus on the usage of tannins and yeast polysaccharide during fermentation. All these points can seem a bit disconnected, but they are really all related to the climate change and what we're observing every day in our winemaking approach. So I will go very quickly on all these points, but please feel free to ask me any question if you have some about any of these. So we'll start with the high pH. So I'm talking about alternative to sulfur because in high pH conditions, sulfur is not effective as an antimicrobial. Only the molecular sulfur has an action as antimicrobial, which in fact depends on the free sulfur and the pH of the wine. So as you can see here in this graph, if we take the example of a pH of 3.7, which we're talking high pH, and this gets true and true, more true every day. So a pH of 3.7, if we want to be at a 0.8 milligram per liter of molecular sulfur, we have to be at 65 free sulfur, which is a huge amount and will never happen basically in a normal aging condition, because if you do this, you will smell too much sulfur, you will bleach your color, and you will completely block your wine in terms of evolution. And also you take the risk to have too much sulfur and reach a legal issue. So that's why I'm talking about sulfur in alternative to sulfur for microbial control. We have been very successful with bioprotection on grapes. Bioprotection is a very natural way to control microbes. We basically introduce positive microbes or neutral microorganisms that will inhibit the development of unwanted microbes. That's the same concept. That's what you do when you take probiotics for your stomach. I will talk very briefly about this, but we do have a full webinar dedicated on bioprotection that I invite you to watch on our YouTube channel. Our bioprotector is called Excellence B Nature. It is a yeast, non-Saccharomyces, pure Mechnicovia pulcherrima, so a non-fermenting yeast that has a very strong antimicrobial effect, will inhibit all the other microbes. So some non-Saccharomyces will inhibit bacteria, and Brettanomyces that might develop in the grapes might inhibit Saccharomyces and also usually produce VA. Using B Nature will allow you to completely inhibit these microbes, keep your grapes and juice clean, no VA production, no fermentation happening, and so you will help promote your own Saccharomyces or a commercial strength if you use a commercial strain to ferment. So you will have better fermentation, cleaner fermentations with no sulfur added. We made it in a way, this product is actually very easy to use because you can use a dry powder and sprinkle it directly on grapes, on juice. And this is very commonly used when grapes have to travel. So we send it in the vineyard, we spray it on the grapes when they are picked. And so the grapes are protected all the way to the winery. Or if you have some grapes that has to be stored in the winery and will not be processed right away. Same story with juice. If you do any stabilization, lees, contact, that's a great way to protect them too. And then lately we have been using them on our equipment to really make sure we protect our equipment. And even after sanitation, we spray these to be sure if there is something alive, it is our B Nature that is actually not doing anything to wine. The second point I want to talk about quickly is the alternative of sulfur we have for microbial control during aging. And the best option we have is called Chitosan. Chitosan is a molecule. The commercial name is called Kilbret. Kilbret is 100% Chitosan. And Chitosan is a polysaccharide that is derived from Aspergillus niger. So vegan, allergen-free, biodegradable antimicrobial agent that has a wide spectrum of activity. It will remove Brettanomyces, but also Lactobacillus, Pediococcus, Enococcus, and Acetobacter. So with one treatment of Chitosan during aging, you allow your wine to be clean of spoilage microbes. And so you have an extra protection if you use sulfur, but also just a full protection if you don't use sulfur. These graphs are just to show you how after a few days, your wine is completely out of microbes. So quickly I can explain you. Here we are having a picture of Brettanomyces cells. Here is a picture of these Brettanomyces cells 1 day after the Chitosan added. Chitosan is going to be binded to the cell walls of the cells, the microbe. So basically Chitosan is positive, cell walls are negative, they bind to each other. Then at this point, Chitosan is completely surrounding the cell. So the cell can't communicate with outside, can't feed itself, can't have any interaction with the outside environment, which already stopped its metabolism. So there is no more metabolism. We saw there is no more volatile phenol produced if we take the example of Brettanomyces. The second step that you can see here, 4 days after, the cells start to be leaking. So there is actually an interaction of the Chitosan is altering the cell walls of the cell. And so the perforating the membrane, and so the cell is going to empty itself outside. It's dead already and it's leaking. 8 days after the Chitosan addition, there is no more cells. Okay, so it's pretty tragic and dramatic story, but Chitosan is very efficient. You can do a treatment. You will first stop the metabolism of the yeast or bacteria. Second, kill them. Third, settle them down. Because Kilbret is 100% Chitosan, we're working at very low treatment. We always recommend to work as preventive. So preventive means post-malo, just add some Chitosan there to kill whatever is alive and protect your wine. In this case, we work with 4 grams per hectoliters, no racking. If we know there is microbes in it, we work with curative method. And in this case, we go with 6 to 8 grams per hectoliters, followed by a racking. And then we add 2 more grams per hectoliters for protection that we leave in the wine. Okay, so this was the 2 alternatives to sulfur that has been very efficient for microbial control, that will really allow you to have a good control of your grapes and your wine without using sulfur in high pH condition or not. Now, the next point was to talk about tools that we have available to balance acidity in wine. Of course, we can treat with acid. Tartaric acid is the most commonly used, but its efficiency is variable. The impact on pH depends strongly about the buffer capacity of our wine and also the amount of potassium we have. And it is an unstable acid that has a very hard mouthfeel. Malic acid, unstable, as it can be fermented by bacteria, and it also gives you a pretty hard mouthfeel. And then lactic acid, that is stable and is a soft acid, so it's actually more like a yogurt type of acid. And this one can be added towards the end, pre-bottling, because it is stable and it's actually a very smoothing effect in the wine. So lactic acid is actually a very interesting acid to work with. Then there is a new way, natural way to do this, to balance acidity in wine, is to use a yeast, an acidifying yeast, which the strength is called Lachenza thermotolerans, another non-Saccharomyces, that we are going to call X Fresh, as it is our commercial name. So what is Lachenza thermotolerans? It's a non-Saccharomyces strength. It has a strong genetic diversity. So there is other on the market. We selected X Fresh because of its ability to produce a lot of lactic acid, as you're going to see later on, but also because we like a lot, we extract it from grapes, and we liked a lot the effect that it does on wine, which also produce some esters and acetate that participate to freshness. La Scienza thermotolerance is a non-sac yeast that will have a medium fermentation capacity, so 7 to 9% alcohol. So we do need to use a Saccharomyces cerevisiae to finish fermentation when we use the X-Fresh. And the big impact of La Scienza thermotolerance is its ability to metabolize sugar into lactic acid. So basically, the yeast can absorb sugar, produce some glycerol, produce some ethanol, but also produce some lactates that then is exported from the cell into the wine as a lactic acid. Lactic acid, so this pathway will allow us to decrease alcohol as we're using the same sugar to produce alcohol and lactic acid. There is less sugar transformed into alcohol. We can decrease the pH by producing lactic acid and increase the TA. We also participate to the smoothness of the mouthfeel as we are adding some lactic acid. And the last point of La Scienza thermotolerance is that it produces ester and acetate that participate to freshness profile of the wine. How to use it? We usually recommend to not go higher than 50 ppm of sulfur. If you don't use sulfur, the yeast is going to be even more active and faster to implantate and ferment. You rehydrate it as a classic yeast, a chlorine-free water, 104 degrees Fahrenheit degrees with a no steam, our yeast activator, 20 grams per hectoliters in the dosage. If you want a lower effect, you can go to 10 grams per hectoliters. As the X-Fresh is eating mostly DAP, we recommend to add 20 grams per hectoliter of DAP after the inoculation to make sure your Saccharomyces will have enough food. And the minimum temperature is 59 Fahrenheit. We can use it in co-fermentation, so Saccharomyces and X-Fresh together the same day, or in sequential. First the X-Fresh, 48 to 72 hours after we put the Saccharomyces. Application is usually in high pH condition, but also any wine that lack of freshness, press fractions in whites and rosé that are usually higher pH, or as a blending tank as a source of acid. So we make a tank and we let X-Fresh go full on. They can go up to 12 grams per liter of lactic acid, which is a lot. And this you can blend it back and it gives you a source of acid. So let's look at some trial results. This first trial here is Sauvignon Blanc press fraction. We were with a pH of 4.43 to start to 3.43, sorry, to start with. After we did a sequential inoculation of 24 hours in between X-Fresh and the yeast, and we managed to reduce the pH of 0.4. So after the X-Fresh, the wine was at 3 of pH, which was a very big deal for the winemaker because it allowed him to actually use this fraction, this press fraction, into the cuvée and completely valorize the wine. Here, another example where we did co-fermentation, but on red grapes that didn't get any sulfur at crush, so we used only the bioprotection. So without sulfur, the fermentation goes still very fast. We were at a 3.98 pH, initial pH. The control is at this and 15 of alcohol. We ended up after the co-fermentation with the X-Fresh with 3.53 of pH. So we dropped off 0.5 the pH, which is a very big deal as well, and so made the wine completely usable. Another example here where we did a co-fermentation, a Merlot with high brix because we were at 16.4 for the control. We dropped a little bit the alcohol. As you can see, it's not huge. We dropped it to 16. The total acidity here went up to 1 gram per liter. pH went down about 1.1 of pH. And so we produce lactic acid, 1.8 lactic acid. So it's not a huge impact, but it completely changed the aromatic profile. So we really have more intense aromas, way more fresh fruit compared to the ripe fruit. And and the wine is just more structured, longer, with a more fresh and balanced aromatic profile. As you can see in the graph here, the co-fermented is a purple line while the control is blue. So in this case, not a huge impact in terms of analysis. That's because we did co-fermentation, but a pretty strong impact in mouthfeel. Another trial here where we did this trial on a Cabernet Sauvignon in Central Valley last year, a sequential inoculation with 48 hours in between the X-Fresh and the yeast. We are comparing the X-Fresh to a control in blue, X-Fresh in purple, and two other La Scienza thermotolerance from our competitors here in gray. As you can see, the one that produces the most lactic acid is the X-Fresh, and that's why we selected it. So it's great, and it also means you can use half dosage if it's too much lactic acid for you. And you see that we had a pretty good impact as we started with pH of 4.1 in the control, and we end up with a 3.5 of pH with the X-Fresh. So we managed to reduce of 0.5 the pH with an increase of TA of 3.2 and lactic acid of 1.7, and our VA is lower from 0.6, we are at 0.2. We also did a cost comparison in this trial where we try to compare how much it would cost to add this to have this pH reduction with tartaric acid. So using the X-Fresh, we know at 20 grams per hectoliters, we know it costs us 15 cents a gallon. Using tartaric acid, we would have to use at least 5 grams per liter to get a pH reduction of 0.5, which taking pretty low cost of tartaric acid, $8 a kilo, as an example, we end up with $15 a gallon too. So same price, same cost, very different impact, as the X-Fresh will really give you an integrated acid profile with lactic acid that is very soft, while the tartaric addition will give you very hard acidity, especially at 5 grams per liter, but also it's gonna not be stable. So through time, you will have to add more tartaric because this tartaric is gonna precipitate. So to summarize on the X-Fresh and this natural way to acidify your wine, you can use it in co-inoculation. You will have a lighter effect on analysis, but a strong effect on the mouthfeel and the aromatic profile of the wine. You can use it in sequential, 48 to 72 hours post the X-Fresh, you will add the yeast. Your choice will depend on how much lactic acid you want to produce, but also which temperature you are fermenting and if you use sulfur or not on grapes. Please feel free to contact me, email me, and I will help you deciding if you need to do co-inoculation, sequential, how long you want to wait. The last application is to work on a blender tank. And for this, we are recommending to put the X-Fresh and do a full fermentation with it. And then once it starts to slow down, you can add the Saccharomyces. Know that the X-Fresh can go up to 12 grams per liter of lactic acid, which is a lot. If you taste your blender tank, you will see it's very sour, but it's actually a great acidifier. So this is usually used to as a cost-effective way to acidify tank, because you basically have a full source of lactic acid to blend back. Be careful with this blender tank because malolactic is not possible at 12 grams per liter of lactic acid. So you will need to blend before you do malo, so you can consume the lactic acid, the malic acid present in this tank. Okay, so then I say I have a good protocol for you, talking about how to finish fermentation with high Brix grapes. That's gonna be completely, it's a very successful protocol that is very simple. So if you are talking about high Brix grapes or high fructose content or even press fractions, we recommend to use our LA Bianus, which is a Saccharomyces ex Bianus yeast, fructophilic yeast that resists to very difficult conditions. At 30 grams per hectoliter, we rehydrate it before with a no steam, and then you put it in your wine at 5 brix or when you're pressing. And that's it. The yeast will finish the fermentation. Please email me if you want more detailed protocol, but that's very simple. It's a classic inoculation at 5 brix or at pressing. Next point was to talk about how can we increase the aromatic freshness of the wine. So that's also something that happened with all these heat waves that we're seeing, is blockage of maturity, green character, or overripe grapes. So we need to work on these aromas to make the aromatic profile fresh and pleasant and attractive for our consumers. So the wine aromas are at this stage usually ester and acetates that are banana, pear, apple, peach, pineapple, red fruit, candy-like fermentation aromas, basically, that participate a lot to freshness. The other aromas that participate to freshness are the thiolic compounds. They are very well known in whites and rosé, so they are grapefruit, orange, lime, lemon, any citrus family, basically kiwis, passion fruit, any tropical fruit, but they are actually studied in red wine too. They participate a lot in the aromatic freshness of the wine, and they participate to blackberry, blackcurrant, gooseberry type of aromas. Then the last family that also participate to aromatic intensity and freshness are the terpenes and oresoprenoids. Terpenes and oresoprenoids are smelling like roses, violet, but also lychee, raspberry, cinnamon, spices, mint, black pepper, all these aromas that really can lift the aromatic intensity of your wine and give you way more freshness on the nose. So how are we going to increase their expression and production? Is basically, first, we have to boost the production of these aromas during fermentation. This is usually done with the yeast metabolism. So ester and acetates are produced by the yeast. So yeast choice and yeast nutrition are huge impact. Thiols, terpenes, oresoprenoids are varietal aromas. So the yeast choice is here to really help you expressing as much as you can these varietal aromas that are precursors in the grapes. The second point is really to focus on aromatic expression. So expressing all these precursors of varietal aromas that are not expressed yet. And if you don't do it, they will not be, and it's aromas that are lost. The third point is to protect these aromas during aging with a good antioxidant protection. So talking about boosting aromatic production, you can use different yeast. Talk to your supplier. I'm happy to help you with your choice of yeast, depending your variety and what you are looking for. But also you can play with nutrition. We have nutrients such as optithiol. Optithiol is inactivated yeast rich in glutathione. Optithiol will give you nutrients that are not having nutritive effects, but nutrients that are precursors of aromas. So optithiol will give you precursors of thiolic compounds. So when you use it at inoculation, you really can increase a lot the production of thiols. Very interesting for whites and rosé, but also for red. It's impressive to increase this aromatic production, and you will see your wine is way more fresh. So I highly recommend to do a trial with it. It's very easy and very impressive to see the results. We also have opti-ester, so same concept, but to increase the esters and acetates production. This is a selection of amino acid and ergosterol that will not give you food as a nutritive power, but gives you food as aromatic precursors. So the yeast will produce more aromas like roses and pears and pineapple, floral notes that will lift your nose and increase your freshness. How to boost varietal aromas expression? Here we need enzymatic activity. So we need all the yeast that will help, but post-fermentation we can still do it with different yeast activities. First, we have a yeast called enozyme thiols. As the name says, it's with an enzyme, called enozyme thiol. And as the name says, It's an enzyme that will help you release your aromatic precursors of thiolic compounds. It also have a side activity as a beta-glucosidase that will allow you to release some of the terpenes and oresoprenoid. Pretty strong result here as well. We can use it during fermentation or during aging, pre-bottling on any type of wine, white, rosé, red. You will see a boost of aromas. Ask me for samples. We can do trial in a little bottle so you can see really what happened in your wine before you put it in your tank. And we have the same concept, really focused on beta-glucosidase. So I would say that this is very commonly used on Gewürztraminer or Riesling aromas. This is way more for white and rosé. We are releasing terpenes, oresoprenoids. It increases strongly the aromatic intensity of the wines. Just to talk a little bit more about thiols, I want to show you trial results here of our anosine thiols used during aging. 3 weeks of contact on a rosé wine. You can see that the pink line is where we use anosine thiol. We increase the aromatic intensity, the freshness, the red berries, and the length and overall quality of the wine by using anosine thiol. On white wine, same concept. We're increasing pretty much every category here: freshness, citrus, tropical, length, and overall quality. We're increasing every aroma related to thiolic compounds that are in precursor form. So if your wine has a lot of precursor, you will see a strong impact. If the wine doesn't have much precursors, you will not see much happening. And in red wine, so thiols are not really commonly talked about in red wines, but they are actually very present. And as you can see here in this graph, when we use this enzyme on red wine, we are seeing an increase in aromatic intensity and in fresh fruit, but a decrease of the perception of ripe fruit, which is very interesting here to see. We are having a better persistency of aromas too. My last point of today, and I will be very quick on this point, is to balance phenolic compounds in wine. So for this, I will refer you to webinars that are already made, dedicated to phenolic compounds and color for red wine, and dedicated to fining when we talk more about white wine and rosé. But basically, with this climate change, with this heat spike, we also can find sunburn, where we see basically the skin of the berries are getting dry and they're very thick and rich in phenolic compounds. It makes them hard to extract, but also for white and rosé, it makes them very bitter and astringent, also sensitive to oxidation, so browning happens faster. What we recommend on white and rosé is to remove this phenolic compound at the early stage. So doing a fining with protein-based fining agents that we can do during settling, cold settling, clarification, or we use it also during fermentation. Here I put Polymix Nature and Green Fine Mast, which are 2 fining agents that are vegan, allergen-free, and works very good for this application. The second point, we can try to balance mouthfeel. In the finished wine, we're finishing tannins and polysaccharide. We have samples. Ask us for samples, we'll ship it to you, or send us your wine, we'll work on it and send you back samples for you to taste. On red wine, we first recommend to improve extraction when the skins are very tight, tough, and thick. We don't extract well the color and the phenolic compounds, so using an enzyme such as an enzyme crush to extract is having a strong impact. Then you want to stabilize phenolic compounds by the addition of fermentation tannins, like the soft tannin V. Soft tannin V is a catechin, so very strong tannin, very good tannin for reacting with anthocyanin and other tannin. It's a catechin bonded to a polysaccharide that will help you having a very feel the meat palate and have a ground structure. As you can see the tasting here, the wine treated with soft tannin V got a better balance, better color, better length, softer, more structure, more complex, and also a cleaner aromatic intensity. That's for varieties that are a little bit lower in tannins. If we're talking about grapes that have too much tannins, we actually recommend to work with polysaccharides. And in this case, would be the Nature Soft. Nature Soft is a yeast polysaccharide rich in manoprotein that will give you sweetness and roundness and decrease this perception of dryness and astringency. And then during aging, you can balance the mouthfeel easily by using finishing tannins and polysaccharide. Again, send us sample, ask us for sample. We are here to help. Okay, so I know it was very vast, but I really wanted to kind of touch every topic that are included in climate change. So as a big conclusion here, the first thing to do is actually to work in the vineyard first, and then at the reception of the grapes with good sorting equipment, good distillers that respect the integrity of your grapes. The Booker Osilis is one of the best distiller you can find on the market that will really give you full berries, as you can see in the picture, and help you to eliminate all the mug and these dry resins that participate to all these overall aromas, overripe aromas, and a spike of sugars. Then focus on sulfur alternative for microbial control. As we are talking high pH, you will struggle to control microbes with just sulfur. Bioprotection is a great tool on grapes, and then Kilbreth Chitosan will be great on wine during aging. To balance acidity in wine, we have a natural way now that is a new product that is called Excellence X Fresh, a yeast that will produce lactic acid and will give you a balanced acidity and also a lower pH. To increase aromatic freshness of the wine, you can boost the aromatic production via nutrition and yeast, but you can also boost the aromatic expression with specific enzyme during aging. To complete fermentation when we're talking high bricks, don't forget about this because it's a really great tip. Use the LA Bayanus at 5 bricks with the no steam. You will see it's going to finish your fermentation and you will not have to do any restart, no more restart. Balancing the phenolic compounds is a full other topic here, but on red wine, we're really talking about using this enzyme to extract your color and your own phenolic compounds. On whites and rosé, we're talking about doing fining at early stage to remove these phenolic compounds that are responsible of bitterness and astringency and browning. During fermentation for red wine, we can use Soft and V or Nature Soft, and then we can do bench trial on finished wine to balance the structure and the mouthfeel. Okay, so this was dense, I know, but feel free to ask me any question you have. Email me anytime you want. I will be happy to help you. So thank you very much for your attention, and I see you next time.